Good morning, Lou.
Good morning.
Welcome to our wonderful podcast this morning here at your Daily Gameface. I'm Dr. Kimberly Lannon, and I'm here to talk to you about your best life and living your best life. I was thinking about you this week, Lou, because we've had lots of conversations.
And apparently everybody's best life involves putting me on the spot. Is that what I'm led to believe?
Well, you're so good at it,
Yeah.
right? So, but I was thinking today that I was going to ask you, because a lot of people wrote in last week and also called and said lots of questions and everything. And they're like, what is your best life? So I'm like, I'm going to ask Lou, because what is your best life? What's your idea of what a best life is? Because it's so different for so many people. There's some standard answers, but I thought we'd talk a little bit about that today. And also self-esteem issues have come up and people have asked questions about not living in victim roles, not, relying on other people to be happy. But I thought we'd start today with what makes you have your best life?
You said it's different for different people.
Right.
I think it's different for everybody individually, depending on where they are.
Okay.
Like, for example, asking me the question now, at my age, what I've been through, peace is my best life. Uh-huh. Just, being able to roll off stress and not take anything too deeply and not, just have peace. Just be able to set things down. That's been the thing for me the last few years.
So set things down, like making sure that you don't have to take things as personally or not holding on to them as much or...
Well, as we've discussed, I'm a threat generator.
Yeah.
So understanding that not everything is going to end up in a dumpster fire.
Right.
And understanding that there's nothing I can do about that tonight.
Right.
So I'm going to sit down and I'm going to watch Trailer Park Boys or something for a couple hours or walk on the beach or whatever it is.
Right.
Take a couple hours to put things down and being able to shed that for a while.
So how long do you think, because this is a common question I get, when people come in my office, they say, how long is this going to take? How long do you think it has taken you to actually find those moments of peace now, what you're generating to have a best life? Or is that, it's obviously a work in progress, but...
It's interesting you use the word find because it's as much creating as finding.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And it took me 50 plus years to figure it out. It's funny, we had a conversation after the last podcast, I think, and this is my thing with my kids now who are 24 and 20. It's like, I'd like you to learn these lessons before you get into your 50s.
Right.
Right?
Right.
But when I was their age, when I was 24 or when I was 34 or 44 and married and had kids and stuff like that, my best life had a different definition. I'd be hard-pressed to think back what that was. Mostly it was, especially when the kids were born, it was kids-oriented.
Well, it's contextual, right?
Yeah.
It's based on the moment that you're in or that time frame that you're in, what that is. But even back then, I would imagine, just like I see clients now in their 20s, and the best life that they're thinking is so based on getting a job, getting the right job, money. It's not about peace. It's
right.
The movement forward with wisdom over time that you've gotten and hopefully I've gotten hopefully it's getting that peace over time.
And I see people now, and we might be out, whether it's the ballpark or on the beach or whatever we're doing, and they're sitting there and they're railing on and on about something that's going on somewhere else.
Right.
Some kind of problem. And again, we all have major problems, so, you understand, you get consumed by that sort of thing. But, this conversation you had with a coworker, and you're on the beach and you're railing about that, it's like, okay, look around you.
Right.
Why are you carrying that here?
You're missing out on so much because you're harboring all the stuff that has nothing to do with the moment now or going forward.
Right.
Right, because it's sitting on you.
Yeah.
We're trained to do that. We're just so conditioned and trained into being past focused. And if there could be tons of psychology books written on it, I think that there should be about how much focus is put on what was, what could have, what should have, what didn't, as opposed to here and now. There's certainly amazing things written about now and here and now, and like Eckhart Tolle and the power of now and sitting with yourself in the moment and all that. But people don't spend time there to find their peace or their best life. And
correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. I'm guessing it's because most people are and I don't mean this the way it's going to sound, except I do mean this the way it's going to sound.
Okay.
Most people are ego-driven.
Oh, yes.
They're railing on about the conversation they had with a coworker because it hurt their ego. It hurt their self-image.
Yes.
They have to reconcile it with themselves.
Yeah.
They're still working on that. They're not working on the conversation with the coworker or the problem.
No,
they're saving
solution.
face.
Right.
Yeah. They're personally saving face.
So interesting facts about ego. So people often think, and so I want to give a little bit of background on this. People often think when you say ego, they think,
conceited,
yeah. Arrogant, over the top, right? All descriptors that go with ego, but it's so important, I think, for people to have a really good contemporary working knowledge of what the ego is. The ego is, if you think of it as a structure, which it's not, but if you think of it as a structure in the body, you can place it, near your heart or your soul if you want to think of it as an entity.
Can I sidetrack you for a second?
Yes.
Why do therapists always ask you, where do you feel that?
Well, that's a longer answer. I'll come back to that.
Is it related?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It is.
I never understood that question.
Yes.
Where are you feeling that right now?
I will explain that to you.
Okay.
Don't let me forget to come back to that. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Come back.
All right.
Okay. So contemporary, the ego itself, I think of it as a structure. So the way I explain it is, it's like a structure. You can think of it like your soul or your heart or some space here, or maybe a lot of clients think of it in their head, but it's the space that is your reality manager. It's what everything when you're growing up from 0 to 6 and then beyond, but predominantly when you're 0 to 6, really formulates who you are in your reality.
Right.
What you think of yourself, what other people think of yourself, and then the world itself and how you think of the world, right? So it's that reciprocating process. Now, all the damages that happen, you're stupid, you'll never be good enough, whether it's said or implied, or you're amazing, you're wonderful, you're over the top, whatever the messages are from coaches, parents, whatever it is, they create the ego reality. They create that structure to be either really full or really small, damaged, broken, torn, however you want to see it. So we call those hits to the ego narcissistic injuries, because the ego ends up feeling lots of damages, baggage, people say, I brought my baggage. That's the damage to the reality manager. Your reality manager is completely either really distorted or has a really good view of things. Nobody has a perfect ego, but that damage to the ego or the non-damage to the ego is what makes a person function at their best. And so if people don't look at their actual ability to know what their damages are or their hits to their ego, the functioning, that's when you get self-esteem issues, anxiety issues, depression issues, because it really goes to, can you identify underneath what hurt me so I can look at it? You can't go back in the past to fix it, but man, you can change your reality now by alternative thoughts or finding fact and basis to, this has no real merit. Just because somebody told me I wasn't going to make it doesn't mean that that's really true. But people buy in. You hear it long enough, you buy into it, and then you dance with the devil that you know. So that ego piece.
Do you? That's the struggle, not necessarily buying into it. And that's where we get into self-esteem.
Right.
Because if someone can hurt you, if a coworker can hurt you and damage your self-image by saying something, a healthy person can let that go. A healthy person,
because they know how to
them.
moderate and modulate their ego. They regulate their emotion because they know that it sort of bounces off of them.
Plus, they know the truth.
Right. Well,
in
they
other
know
words,
the fact behind it, that there is no fact, or that they don't believe in the fact. But when you're a little kid, go back to like being a little kid. And you
or
hear a
someone
bad
tells
message.
you don't know what you're doing. If you are solid and you know what you're doing, you understand it for what it is. Them issuing a statement based on what's going on their side.
Right. But if you don't, but so many people don't know that on the receiving end, that they're receiving that and that it's triggering them for something that's already there. Then they get that spending time on the beach talking about the boss instead of like, it's not a big deal because it doesn't actually represent me. That's more about them than me. But that's a hard process to get to, because if you think of being a child growing up and being an adult with all those messages in your head and that narrative that sits heavy on your soul or your ego or that structure that's your reality, and someone says, you didn't do a good job, and you've had this little ear thing that says, oh, dad's in my ear or mom's in my ear or grandma's in my ear saying you're never going to be anything, and it's not really present. That one comment from your boss or whoever, now it sends you in a spiral of talking on the beach and ruining your peace all day long, because it's hitting that little piece on the ego to say, it's going to get you, and it's not going to resolve because you have never addressed it. And that's what everybody talks about in my office. And I make sure I point out that you have these, shreds in your ego that you have to sort of repair, tape them all together and put them back together, because that's where, when you have really big damage, if we want to go to the end extreme on ego, when people are so damaged, that's when you get like sociopathic behaviors, really pathological things that can't really be repaired because there's so much hurt. And the underside is shame. The underside of the ego damage is shame and guilt, which is narcissism. Yeah. And narcissism comes out as that big, arrogant, conceited, I'm amazing, because the person's really not that amazing inside. They don't feel that way, but they have to tell you they are.
Right.
The one-uppers.
Yeah, see, that 6 shows right there, narcissism. But
right?
But this process it starts in middle school, where you're...
Before.
Well, where you're more vulnerable to this because you don't have a strong self-image and strong self-confidence normally to get into the social situation of, say, middle school,
right,
where people are coming at you all the time,
right,
about your problems.
Right.
And you don't know yourself well enough. You don't have enough confidence in yourself to beat that off.
Right.
So you start to take it to heart.
Right.
And I think many of us spend much of our teens, 20s, 30s just fending this off all the time. This is constantly in your head. You're just constantly trying to save face and feel good about yourself, and that's what's stressing you out.
Well, so going back, middle school is where you do see a lot of it come out, but it's really set up before that, because the child, by the time they get to 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, there's not that structure that protects. There's not the resiliency that's needed. You see some kids that have great resiliency and others that don't by the time they get there, and then they're very vulnerable to the school bully, the taunting and teasing of certain cliques and groups. They don't fit in, and it's because of the fact that they were set up, coming up through intentionally sometimes by parents and sometimes not, but to be in that position. And I think that's where, it's so important that teachers know about these kinds of things, even though it's another extra piece of their job that they already have that's hard, plus, counselors and other people to watch that, because kids are so vulnerable to the things that are brought up through. And by the time they get to middle school, they have very minimal resiliency, and the self-esteem is, they look at another kid and, let's take the basic grade competition. I got a 97, you got a 94, and I have kids that will come in and say, I didn't do well. And I'm waiting for, what do you think I'm waiting for? Like the F, right?
Yep.
A 91. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, exactly.
What do you mean? Well, it wasn't a 96 and Sarah got a 97. Oh my gosh,
And that's basic stuff that you don't think about as a parent. It's that the dishwasher didn't get loaded correctly and you let slip out, you can't do anything right.
Right.
Oh, that sticks.
Right.
That sticks big time.
Huge. Or you put the dish in the wrong spot and it's, you're so stupid.
Yeah. Sticks.
Yeah.
And that makes them vulnerable to people in middle school who are going to say, you're stupid.
Right.
You can't do anything right.
And parents don't realize, and it's, most parents are innocuous. They don't mean what they're saying. No. By
the way, that's usually echoing what they heard.
Well, right, and it's not. We're not going to blame the parent, but what we're going to do is we're going to honor and validate for the kid or whoever, the adult, that you interpret it. Like if your mom or dad says that to you, Lou, right?
Yep.
You interpreted something from that. Not only did you hear the message and you took it for you're stupid, now you've interpreted. Oh my gosh, my parents, who are my world at this age, who I know everything through, they're the pinnacle. This is before we realize in our teenage years that, they're wrong some of the time. They're not God, right? That they don't like me. They don't think of me highly. They disrespect me. Maybe they don't love me, depending on what's said. And now you've got you go into middle school and someone says, you're so stupid. And that's like, it's the hit right to the ego.
But what kids don't understand in that situation, it's sometimes it's vernacular.
Yeah.
A parent might say, you can't do anything right. They don't mean it that strongly. They don't mean you can't do anything right. It's just, like I said, probably just regurgitating what they get as a kid.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Getting those. So I battle this today, too.
Or, Lou, their coping strategy of how they've learned to deal with what they learned in their life.
Yeah.
Like, so that it's not necessarily something that they've heard, more often than not it is, but it's how they've then coped with it So then they're frustrated or whatever. And so when they see a behavior that they don't like, they just blurt out something as a way of like managing it instead of saying, oh, that's unfortunate that you did that because that's really not the right way and you need to do it this way. People in general, fast. We don't have time to have extra words.
Right. Well, this is what you have to, this is one of the things you have to learn, because I struggle with this today. I'm a writer.
Yeah.
I talk for a living. And my favorite saying is words mean things.
Right.
I'm very careful about what I say.
Right.
So when someone says something that I find particularly harsh, sometimes you have to understand it's just the way they interact. It's just their way, that either they can only express it that way, or it didn't mean to them the way it's landing with me.
Right.
And that's a very tough thing to wrap your head around sometimes.
Right. And
especially when it's people important to you.
Right. Yep. And I think when people say like sleep on it, it's amazing how you've had this experience, I'm sure, but you've had something so upsetting today.
Yep.
Take the boss issue that we were talking about, and then you sleep on it, and you think, and you're not thinking about it, you're not ruminating, but the next day it's in it. Usually, it's so much different because your perception has changed to calm it down, because now all of a sudden you've implemented that. It's not the end of the world. It's really not going to be a big deal. It's
that first visceral reaction is gone, and now you're thinking about it a little bit more clearly.
Right, and you're not taking it as personal at that point. Usually, I mean, certainly there's some exceptions to that rule.
So, what's the most common answer to your question? What's your best life?
What's the most common?
Yeah.
So it depends on the age range of people. So
I want a family. I want kids.
So it's typically my best
career.
life is having lots of 20s and 30s, late 20s, early 30s is providing the best life for my family outside of them. Kids, it's usually playing games, the things that are relevant to them.
Sure.
Athletes, it's interesting because recreational athletes, it's winning. Like what's important, you could give them every answer in the book to have a choice, and it's winning, being the best athlete, being the best player, being the best whatever. When you give someone just like a regular business person the question, it's often answers like peace, wisdom, patience, kindness, love, things that have come over time with experience and just knowledge. But it's contextual of the age of the and actually I think not just the age, but the exposure rate. I call it the exposure rate of what the person's environment is like. Are they rich in an environment where they have lots of amazing things in their life that they can draw on, things to have a best life that would give them lots of opportunities to think of other ways? Or are they more small in their range of experience, and therefore they can still have their best life, but it's going to come from a very different experience base? It might just be that, I want to make sure that I pay off on my credit card debt. Whereas, you have other people who are like, I want to make sure I don't lose in the stock market. Or, so, the best life is so different in an answer. But by and large, people want to be happy. Yeah. I mean, I just want to be happy.
But that's a different thing to everybody.
Right.
Like, for example, I'm an overthinker. I'm a threat generator. And that led to stress all my life. Yeah. And of course, you have kids, and that adds more stress. Right. You're building a career. That leads to more stress. Money, houses, it's stress. So you get to a point where I'm at the point in my life where I've paid my dues.
Right.
I've fought the wars.
Right.
And I understand I still have stuff I have to deal with, but I still want time for myself where none of that matters.
Right.
And what you do is you find out that you go back to your best times. When were your best times? And they were when you were in the moment.
Right.
When you were just dealing with that. You weren't threat generating, you weren't thinking of all the things. And by the way, you survived that just because you took your hand off the wheel on this small work issue for a week to go to Disneyland with your kids or something. Nobody died. Right. And you start learning those things. And so you start trying to find those, as you said, and then you work on creating them. Right. Yeah. That's
so now,
the evolution.
If I'd had you in my office when you were a kid, and this is what I do with kids that are in the threat generating mode and all that, starting really young, is I'll say to them, at the end of the day, did anyone die? Yeah. Did anyone blow up in flames? And I add the humor in with some of those things because I want to show them that there's so many bad things, but they're really not as bad. Right. The 91 that makes someone, stop eating and fall apart. I'm like, you're going to have about 500 more tests in the next 2 years just alone. No one's going to remember this 91. Yeah. Well, or no one's going to remember, your MCAS score from, last year, really, because
Yeah.
it doesn't matter at the end of the day. It really doesn't matter.
Where is this going to be 6 months from now? Where is this going to be 6 weeks from now? Where is this going to be next week?
Right.
How much energy do you want to give this?
Right. So it's sort of counter. We want people to be present, but we want people to be present with a reality check and grounded that, okay, it's not as bad as we think. It's not going to be the end. And that it's so important because people get stuck in the I can't generate any other thoughts and alternatives of how this could go, where this is, where this has come from, so therefore it must be this and only this. And then it's paralyzing for people emotionally. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why people get so stuck and ingrained in this anxiety and depression space.
That's where we get to two of my favorite golf tips. And I call them golf tips because there's these little mantras of sayings that you can bring into situations, and it helps you get perspective on them. And I just forgot both of them, which it was. First of all, thoughts are not facts.
Yes.
I'm a threat generator. And so I'm always generating threats. And just because I'm thinking it, just because I've worked out the scenario, doesn't mean that's the way it's going to go.
Correct.
And that's a big corner to turn.
Right.
And, so you have to keep that in mind. Thoughts are not facts. Thoughts are just your mind throwing up threat generating. Yeah.
But people believe that those thoughts, because if you ask, because there's a technique that I use about, it's cognitive behavioral therapy essentially, but there's a technique in there where you challenge the thought.
Yep.
And I'll take them all the way through, and we get to that one point, and there's like 2 more parts after it. We have the worst time for almost all people getting over the challenge of the thought, because I ask people to find the fact in it. And people will say, what they say is a challenge. They'll say, well, because this is why it's true. But it's not fact. But they believe that it's fact. Because so-and-so said this, because I did do this, because I am failure. And I'm like, but that's not fact. What do you have to back it up? But people have such a hard time stepping back to be able to observe that isn't fact. That just because someone told you that, or because this happened, it doesn't mean everything. It's just one thing.
Yeah, it's a 91. I'm not getting to Columbia because of it, or I'm not getting Brown because of it. And it's like, okay.
But there's no fact to back that up.
No.
It's just a 91, right? Or, in terms of like when I work with people in addiction, it's oftentimes we get to that point where the person will say, well, I'm a failure. What makes you a failure? My parents said so. I stole from them. I did all these things. Okay, well, those are facts about what you did. But in general, are you a failure? Challenge it and tell me what is the fact. No one can generate that, and people will sit with that, and at the end, maybe it's 2 minutes, maybe it's 20 seconds, and they go, huh, because it's like that little aha moment that there actually is no fact, but it's this storyline. For the addict, how about
I'm a survivor? How about I'm working on this? How about I've had issues in the past. You're not a failure right now. You're working on this.
Right. Yeah. Right. And failure doesn't mean you are a failure.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if we talked about this. It means there was a failure. There's a behavioral failure. There's a breakdown somewhere that happened, but without failure, and as cliche as it sounds, you have to have failure to be able to move forward. How do you learn? Parents who protect their kids from ever falling down, essentially, literally and figuratively. Like, they're always there to buffer, always there to buffer, always there to buffer.
No, let them take a hit or two.
You have no resiliency.
Pick the hits, but let them take the hit.
Right. Yeah. And having, I don't want them to have to learn the hard way. Well, sometimes that's really important because you can't, how do they ever know how to fix it for themselves? I have parents that do the smothering and the helicoptering of, I got to run into the school every time something is bad. I'm like, you're setting your kid up for bad mojo with their peers socially and with teachers, that they can't fight their own battles. You're not giving them skills. All the best intentions in those cases, but at the end of the day, you're setting up a kid to be super dependent on you as the fixer, and that failure means imperfection, therefore I'm bad and you don't love me.
Plus, it's the action and consequence thing that we talked about.
Right.
No, you've got to do the extra credit. You didn't do the work on that test, you got to do the extra, or that project, you've got to do the extra credit.
Right.
And it's okay, you're not a failure.
Right.
But this is what you did, and so next time, make sure you do the assignment, and you won't have to be doing the extra credit work.
Right, right. Which I say I'm a big fan, and I don't know if you know about this stuff that they've introduced in a lot of school systems now, which I think is great. Some teachers, not all, but some teachers, if there's a failing grade, they'll let the student reteach to the student, and then they'll let them redo the exam or the whatever, and they won't give them the full grade, but they'll give them the partial because it's the process, and they reward the process. And it's not, I'm not a believer in everybody gets a trophy, because I'm not. And coming from the background I'm in, and also the psychological research is, it's good for everyone to build self-esteem for participating, but there is only one first place.
Right.
And second and third and fourth and fifth, and to be proud of where you finish, because if you don't,
that makes it worth working for.
If you're 40,000 people in a marathon and you're 39,600, because man, I've been there, right? It doesn't matter what place, it matters how did you get there. I know the story of how I made it all the way to the end of that, and it didn't matter how long it took me, what place I was in. All it mattered was what.
But your goal wasn't to win the race.
No.
Your goal was to complete the marathon.
Right.
And those programs you're talking about in school, it takes it off a grade orientation or score orientation.
Right.
The object of it is to learn the material.
It's to learn the material.
It's not the score or the grade. It's just, did you leave understanding the material?
And I think that there's so much lost on so many levels and different venues around people's growth, whether you're a little kid all the way up through, of outcome is so important. Yeah. And when if I'm working with a pro athlete versus a regular, recreational just starting out, I always say we're not focusing on outcome. We're focusing on one thing to get us better so that the outcome will come.
Yeah.
The win will come if we do the work.
Process.
There's a great runner out there. His name's Roger Robinson. He's an amazing masters runner, and he always talks about this with his coaching. He says, it's not about the win. The win will come. Just do the work. If you don't do the work, you're going to get what you put in.
Yep.
Same with kids in schoolwork. Same with athletes. Same with business. If you're sitting behind a computer playing, games all day, and then your boss comes over and you're like, oh yeah, I'm almost done. It's the same. And then they go at the end of the year, I didn't get my raise. Why? Because you looked like you were doing it, but in fact you weren't.
Yep.
So it's that process, and so important to the ego and to the fostering up of confidence in kids. I think that's such an important thing with little kids. It's giving an F to a child in first grade is what does that do?
Yeah, and again, it's not a participation trophy, but what's the real goal here?
Right. Yeah. And so some of the schools, I know a lot of the public schools.
Give an F to a kid in first grade and he doesn't test well for the rest of his life.
Well, potentially, right?
Potentially,
because it's setting up that, I teach at the college level now, and I get people now that come in before they even have me 2 or 3 days, and they're like, I'm a bad test taker. They preload me with, I don't take tests well. Is there any other way I can get a grade? They haven't even started with me yet to take my test. And I said, well, let's see how the first one goes. But you can immediately see the anxiety over, I'm not going to do well.
It's pre-excuse, though, too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. But you can see the mentality that...
And by the way, that's ego feeding as well.
Absolutely.
Because they're saving face from past test results by accepting the thought that they're bad testers. They're not bad testers.
Right.
Maybe they just didn't put the work in, or had one bad test.
Right.
And they need an excuse because that helped them save face. I'm not struggling with the material. I'm just a bad tester.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Which is, or I don't know how to take a test well.
Yeah.
I'm a bad tester, but I just don't know how to take a test well because either I haven't been calm enough to take it, or I don't know the strategies, because most tests have strategies, or there's material that I don't know, but people don't look at it like that. So I try to explain that to my students, to say there's a couple options here why you might not be doing as well on tests, that you're not doing. I was not when it came to the SAT, for instance, or the big entry exams. I can go back right to that moment going, it was so anxiety provoking because it had so much meaning to my family, and it had so much meaning to me that if I didn't do well, and now it's like, I just remember the experience of going into the room going, this is so overwhelming. And I thought, I'll just bubble everything, back then. And now, I don't even know what the scores are relevant. It doesn't matter. But then it was everything that day. And oh my gosh, my whole life is in front of me. And instead of it being prepared, just do the test, know what you're doing. And at the end of it will be fine. But
if I blow this SIT, my life is over. Oh, really?
Right,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you got some bigger things to deal with down the road. But
right, but in that moment, the context is so much about It's just like the boss. The boss said one thing to you, and now it's like the SAT that's so stressful. And it's just the management of being able to manage through that and what it means. And people put so much meaning on things that at the end of the day, they have meaning in the moment, and they might move you forward in your career here and there, and those are all important things. But, at the end of the day, are you having your best life even if something doesn't go exactly the way, or is it ruining it? Right. Can you not find peace, like you're talking about? Can you not find peace if something goes wrong? And, man, I see so many people that there's no peace.
Yeah.
No peace because things go wrong, and that's the end. And it's no
if things haven't gone wrong, they're creating things in the future that are going to go wrong. They're worried about things in the future that are going to go wrong. It's like, okay, well, just be here now.
Chaos.
Just do this. It's Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
You're gonna laugh. And there's a book. I'm halfway through a book that I've been writing about this. Basically, it's everything I need to know in life I learned from Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
But one of the life-altering things for me was the press conference after the loss against Kansas City. Mm-hmm. The "We're on to Cincinnati" press conference. Yeah. Because I use that a lot. Yeah. No, we're on to Cincinnati. I use it in vernacular.
And so this is great. When you heard that, and you listened to that, what did you interpret? What moved you about it? Was it just the simplicity? Was it the ability to just contain and?
Well, the Kansas City game was a disaster.
Oh, well, yes.
Was a disaster, and it all started clicking with me. It's like you can't do anything about that.
Right.
All you can do is start preparing for what's next. Uh-huh. Right? You can't change the past, and you have some control over the future. But it got me living in the moment more, because that's, and it's just 1 week at a time. This has been Belichick's philosophy. He doesn't talk about the past game. He doesn't talk about 2 weeks from now. He talks about this one. Do your job. All these things are about getting in a good space, staying in the moment. And when we say stay in the moment, a lot of people balk at that because, like, well, you got to plan, you got to think of your retirement. It doesn't mean you don't plan for the future.
Right.
It just means is you deal with what you can deal with now.
Right.
I can't deal with what the stock market's going to be 6 months from now.
Right.
I can deal with what it is now.
What it is right now. Yeah. Right. You can plan out what you want. Right. And that's a huge concept that people don't like you said, about staying present in the moment, because they think that, if I have to stay here, I can't look out to the future. And
it means
you need to look out to the future.
It means you're not shepherding the future, and that's not true.
Right. And Bill Belichick, his philosophy and his way of being about, not going into what happened in the Kansas City game as we're going into the next. He's not going to do that because he knows it's mentally not good for himself. It's not good for the players. It's over. There's no more control. Right. The only control that he had was when he was coaching it, and it was only what he was coaching. Whether or not his players acted on it, they were supposed to do their job. That's why the team has worked so well together, is because he has that philosophy: is if you stay in your own lane,
do your job,
and you stay
control what you can control,
your job, and everyone does their individual job together and stay in the moment, then it works. Yeah.
Plus, for me, it was incredibly freeing.
Yeah.
It was like I can't fix that.
Right.
All I can do is go forward.
Right.
Learn a lesson from it, go forward, take it into what's in front of me right now.
Right.
And that's incredibly freeing. Not relitigating the past all the time. That's what causes people a lot of heartache.
Well, so in making that a little bit of a jump over, so when I work with veterans with PTSD, one of the biggest things that they do, and anyone with trauma by and large, goes in it's the undoing. It's the constant living in how do I go back and undo, the hope that I can go back and fix the past. Although rationally, I've never met anyone that says I can do that. Right. But it's the ego's desire, the soul, the super ego to go back and fix what went wrong. And we perpetuate that out, even if we don't have the same, you don't have the veteran experience of being at war or some natural disaster or some sexual assault or something like that. We all try to go back and rectify the past and undo it. And we spend so much time back there that it backs up on us and sticks because we can't get movement. We hope that our parents will be loving us the way we want them to. We will keep doing that until we go to the grave.
The childhood wound.
Even if the parent has passed. Yep. I have clients and I have family members that, family members have passed, and they just search and search constantly in their own conscious to just constantly be wanting to undo and hopes. And I'm like, the person is passed. How
Yeah.
are you going to do this? And it's not making you feel any better, but their guilt and all the other things that are driving it is so in the way.
It's the childhood wound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the little fractures in the
Right.
ego.
But one of the, and correct me if I'm wrong on this one of the major things in everybody's life is when they have children, when they become a parent.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are refreshed by that because a lot of people find this as a new start. Okay, I didn't do this. My parents and I didn't get this right.
Right.
But I can get it right with my
Exactly.
kids. You know?
Yep.
With my kids and my parenting, it was my parents left me alone. I had an older sister, and they paid a lot of attention to her because she needed it. And they kind of left me alone, which at the time, growing up, I thought was ideal. I thought it was great. As long as I didn't come home with police cars behind me, everything was fine. Yeah. But then I'm making college decisions based on where I'm going to play hockey, as opposed to what college I should be in, what I should be studying. So I learned that, it would have been better if they'd been a little bit more involved. So with my kids, no, I'm sorry, I'm going to be involved. Yeah. You may chafe at this, but I'm going to ask you what your classes are. I'm going to ask you what's going on. I'm going to be involved.
Right. Yes. And that's what.
So I was healing my wound about them not being involved enough by being involved in kids.
Right.
But then, if you can do it through your kids, you can do it through yourself too.
Right.
In your own life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But so I was going to say that so many times that piece is people go to the extreme. So you had this, and now you've gone the other direction. People go to the other side of it, and then it's their kids are. I'm never going to do what my parents did, right?
No,
but
hopefully I didn't do that. But no, I recognize that possibility. It doesn't sound like you did. I mean, it doesn't sound like you did. I was aware of that possibility, and you don't want to go overboard.
Right.
But you just want them to know that you are paying attention and it's important to you.
Right.
Which is what I didn't get.
Right.
I could have not gone to college. They wouldn't have known one way or the other. And it's not because they didn't love me or they didn't care or anything. It's just things were going on in their lives.
Right. Right. And so when I think that, parents often or people come in and say, when I have kids, I'm not doing that with them. Or when I'm never going to be a father like that. I'm never going to be a mother like that. And I always say, well, then what are you going to be? What are you going to do different?
Yep. Just
to get that conversation started, because I think that's such a common thing, like you said, that people say, I'm not going to do what my parent did. Okay, so what are you going to do?
And that's usually explaining the wound, isn't it?
Yeah.
They're not going to do what hurt them.
Right. They're not going to do what hurt them.
Yep.
And but then they don't go further. Usually people just say, I'm not going to do that.
Yep.
And then when you say, well, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Then it's, wait, I didn't think that far ahead. Well, how do you fix that? How do you repair that? How do you make sure you don't do that? What steps are you going to take? Because I see patients over long periods of time, years, that I do sometimes get to a point where I can say, well, you're sort of doing what you told me your father did.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, no, don't tell me that.
Yeah, no, you fall into it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because there are so many things in my upbringing now that you talk about it, what my parents said, that I consciously will refuse to say to my kids.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm beating it down. My mother, one of her favorites, she used to look at me all the time, you spread out like a disease. And it's like, and I was a kid.
Right.
It didn't hit me that hard because I thought that's what parents said.
Right.
We all think that's our experience, is everybody's experience. Right. But as an adult, looking at my own kids, I'm going, how could you say that to a kid?
Right.
It's a horrible thing to say to a kid.
Because it goes back to what I said at the beginning of the show is, how did you interpret that?
Yeah.
I'm a disease. I'm bad.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with me.
Called your
There's
kid a
something she doesn't
disease.
like about me.
Yeah.
How do I make her like me more?
Yep.
Right? All those things go in there, and you never know what it's going to be off of the one phrase that comes out. You never know. And it's so important what people say, but people just don't filter, and often people think kids are resilient, because kids are.
Yeah.
No one's going to die off of being told that they're a disease, but inside that little emotional piece can get.
But with that context of being a parent myself and looking at that child and saying, how could anyone, it stunned me as a parent looking back, how could anyone say that to a kid? Mm-hmm. But by the same token, they were 50s, 60s parents. I was a 1990s, 2000 parent. It's a whole different world, right? It's a completely different world.
So I had a quick story. Hopefully it'll be quick, maybe. So I had this client many, many years ago that came in with her daughter. She was about 5 or 6 years old. And I use this as an example of teaching one of the stages of how to not create guilt and shame in your child, and independence and self-esteem. But she brought her in, and the mother, she was almost 6, I think, and the little girl was very smart. She could articulate, she could sit, because I really don't do kids that are really, really young, because they have very short attention spans, right? So the little girl comes in, and the mother says, here's what's going on. The couple was getting divorced, and, the daughter was having some anxiety and stress, and the mother just wanted her to have help. By the way, it's always going to be the parent that needs to be in the room, just as the end of the story before it gets there, right?
Yep.
So the little girl meets with me. By the second time she meets with me, she had told me she was going to go on like a play date. And so she comes in. I said, oh, how was the play date? Was it good? And she told me she didn't go. And I said, oh, what happened? Why? And it falls out that the mother, talk about saying things that you shouldn't say. Yeah. The mother told her that, if you go, it will make me really sad, and you'll be leaving me like your dad did.
Oh, no.
Right?
Oh, no.
And so and I hear, in my business, I hear stuff like this all the time. And, in my traditional training, keeping the line and not breaking that fourth wall with her, that cringe in my chest of, oh, I'm going to have to talk to your mother. Yeah. And she says, so I just stayed home because I didn't want her to be alone. And the little girl was so matter of fact, because it was her experience. This was normal to her. Yep. And so, of course, I had mom come in.
But she's taking the load of her, whatever went on between her mother and her father. Yeah.
Right. So the mother comes in, and the mother was funny. She's like, am I in trouble? I said, no, but yes.
No, but yes. Yeah.
So I told her about it and everything. I said, you can't say that stuff. And it didn't even dawn on her. And knowing now, and I've known these people now for 20 years.
She was probably trying to say something nice. She was probably trying to say, I'm going to miss you when you go.
Yes, and that's what it ended up being. She just wanted to say, I'm going to miss you, not don't go. But the little girl was like, I don't want to go because, but she did say, and I said, why did you tell her that it's abandoning? She goes, I don't know. She didn't. Yeah. It wasn't even like it was just her emotions got in the way, and then because she didn't think, it went out on the kids. So many times I see that. Right. People just say stuff. Adults say that, but with kids, they're just little sponges, so they take everything so literally.
Isn't that exactly what we're talking about? She was in a moment with her daughter, spending time with her daughter, and stuff that she was dealing with in that moment between her and her ex-husband came into that moment. Yeah. It's like, you should have been with your daughter. You should. Right. Ideally, you could set the relationship stuff aside and just enjoy the time with your daughter. Right. Ideally.
Right. And not have to also then disallow her from going or not see that she wasn't going to go do her play date because of something that was in
she didn't intend it, but got to be careful what you say.
And she was mortified when I connected it for her. She was like, oh God. So so 20 years later,
but some people do intend it.
Right. We all have a laugh about it because I still see them, and girls now in college, or she's out of college now, but we talk about it, and it's still the thing that comes up of like, remember when you said that, so, and the girl always says, I'm never going to talk to my kids like that.
All right. 2 things before we leave. We were talking about your best life.
Yes.
And I'm guessing the first step to getting towards your best life is identifying what your best life is.
Right. What it is for you. So identify what your best life is for you.
What's a simple tool? How do we start figuring out what the best life is for us?
So I think one of the best tools is writing down, putting things out on paper. Visual is super important for people. Processing, right?
Getting thoughts into words.
It means something. And not list. People always think, I got to write so much. It's such a pain. I don't have time, right? Write 2 or 3 things down. Even if it's one thing, just write down what would be something that's important to you to make you have best life. And, money, peace, children, home, whatever it is, but a couple things down, and then once you get it on paper, then there's more techniques to then manifest. How do you get there? What has to change?
Are things okay in this discussion, like a home?
Right.
But a home represents more than just the home, too.
Right, and then you define.
It's not like a Lamborghini. You don't want. My best life isn't. That's not necessarily
what
we're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's just to be aware that you want a best life and that you have the ability to have it, and what does it look like? What would it look like? Paint the picture, put it on paper. A savings account, children, keep my job for a year. I mean, it depends on the context and whatever that is. And then if there's 3 things, for instance, say there's 3 things on the list, then one by one, not all at the same time, but one by one. Yeah. How does that come to be? what is the next step? People immediately see, this is why therapy and office is good, because people go from, I want money, I want a savings account that's big, to it's either $1 million or nothing. And so it's, well, how do you get there? So it's manifesting the steps to get there. People hate doing the steps.
Yeah.
Because when it's easy, when things come automatically, it's like, oh, it works. People,
Yep.
you look at Elon Musk and think he was a millionaire overnight. No, he did a lot of steps. And people go, oh yeah.
This is the golf tip here: is thoughts become things.
Right.
And if you're thinking about the past, most often you're living it, and if you're thinking about a threat, you self-fulfill the threat.
Exactly.
More often than not. Everyone knows that to the negative. Like, you go into a job interview, I'm going to blow this job interview. I'm going to blow this job interview. What do? You blow the job interview.
You blow the job, right? Because you go in with the cognitive mindset and that set mindset, and it's there. It's absolutely there.
So instead, I want to save $10,000, or I want to help my credit score, or I want to get my daughter into a dance thing, and I want her to transition to grade school to be good.
Right.
Focus on the positive things, and those things start to happen because you do small steps.
Right, exactly. And what are those steps? So if it's the money thing, that's a really common one in my office, is like, how do you save the money? And I go through different techniques of what will work. I try to tailor it for the person, because some people are not good organizationally. Some people are not good just impulsively. Some people need to have certain things. So it's a matter of knowing the person, and then being able to say, oh, that's your first goal. So now let's set 4 goals to get there. And what does it look like?
Yeah, that's an important part, because if you were to say, I want to save $10,000, that's big. That's overwhelming. Right. All right, how about this month you save $100?
Right.
And then people, you get momentum from that. You do it, you attain that goal, and you go, okay, I can do this. Next month it's going to be 150.
Right. And when you do out the math, because I just did this with a client recently, that you do out the math and say, if you do $20 a week out of your paycheck, she's a waitress and a bartender, and she does, I said, if you just do $20 a week out of your paycheck, and you do that every week for the next year, and I showed her what the end number was, and I said, just imagine just $20, and her answer to me was, oh, I could do 50.
Yep.
But she had to see it, because in her head it was like, it's this big thing I want, but I don't know how to get there.
Yeah.
But once I showed it to her, because she said, I want this, and then I said, here's what would happen. Then it was, oh, I can do 50.
Yeah.
So in her mind, she could do it, and she's been doing it. And then in the process, she actually started paying off a whole bunch of her debt all of a sudden. Yeah. Because she got motivated, because she could see it.
This is the way it works with weight loss, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to lose 40 pounds. Okay, how about we start with 5?
2?
Yeah.
2 pounds. Let's do 2 pounds. How about you not pick up the bag of Doritos, Lou?
Yeah.
No Doritos for today. No Doritos.
Had a Dorito
no
in 100
Cheetos.
years. But yeah.
Not to knock their company, but they're great. They're yummy, but they don't love.
No, but when you make that first accomplishment, you get excited.
Right.
And you go more, and you're in more. I remember I lost 40, 50 some odd pounds, and it was just, I developed a plan. It's like, it's calorie deficit, 500 calories a day.
Right.
Burn more calories than I
you
eat.
Take in.
Right, exactly. And then so it started to work, and I started to get results. I'm going, I can do 1,000.
Yeah.
So I started working, and I was doing 1,000 calorie deficit a day. Right. It's 2 pounds a week right there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That would be, I think, something, people have talked to me about that. That would be a good show in the future for us to talk about the psychology of weight loss, because it's on so many I get that at least 10 times a week in my office, and I'm working, I work with my athletes on, people that are doing like couch to 5K, couch to half marathon. People are trying to drop weight, and how to do that, and how to maintain, and how to stay, because of my other side of doing like the integrative medical piece that I do. So it helps with, I do the medical, mental health stuff with the actual training. And so, and people always love to talk about what really, the whole concept of Noom out there, the new weight loss program that's really not that new, but it's the one that's all cognitive behavioral based. It's all therapy based, essentially, to make people more motivated. And
it's no coincidence that I started to make gains and all the other stuff once I started losing weight and getting into that program, because that's the skill set you need. Well, yeah, but it was the disciplines and the skill sets. I don't want to use discipline because people get turned off by that word too. But
it's the structure that you needed for yourself. It's not discipline, because people think of it as will and want and weakness or not. But it's the structure you provide yourself to flourish in, and it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
Like what your structure is different than like what my structure would be. You know, there's certain nutritional things that have to be met in order to maintain certain things, but by and large, the way you do it is going to be very individualized and based on your own mindset too, and what motivates you versus not. If you tell people you can't eat that, I don't tell people they can't eat that.
No.
I say there could be a better choice.
I always describe my weight loss as I just didn't eat stupid 100% of the time.
There you go.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like I never denied myself anything, but it was always, I get into the mindset of, well, I could have that piece of pizza, or I could, have a steak tonight.
Right, exactly.
Like that.
So that's the cognitive behavioral piece that in therapy that it's like, it's just generating an alternative. You can have the piece of pizza.
Yep.
You can have 2 pieces of pizza, but later you're not going to have a baked potato and pasta.
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
now later you have to have a salad because you're maintaining your balance of what you're going to
Actually,
have.
It was.
You know?
I could have those M&Ms, or I could have Bailey's tonight. It was those kind of choices.
Or the glass of wine.
Yeah.
Or the vodka tonic, right?
Yeah, right. And before we leave,
yes.
Why do therapists ask people where they feel it?
So
this has always fascinated me.
Okay, so
I was always stumped by this question.
So the main reason that I ask that is because when you ask someone where they're feeling it, it takes them out of their head about what they're thinking about the answer and actually puts them into the grounding of the body and the experience itself to actually get a genuine, to know what you'll actually know what you're actually feeling and how it really impacts you when you say, where do you feel that? And there's different, if you feel it in your stomach versus your head versus, it gives me as a clinician a lot of information about where you hold your stress. So if you feel it in your head, that means your overthinking process is causing you greater cardiovascular vascular constriction in your head. If you're feeling it in your heart,
so there's an actual physical component to this.
So there's, if you're holding it down in your abdomen, you'll find that people who hold their stress, and you find that out, when they come in, they have IBS, right? Irritable bowel syndrome. And then you say, well, where do you feel it when you feel sad? Right here. Coincidence.
Yeah.
And pointing out the connections between the mind and the body of how they're impacting each other is the most common reason for asking that. There are some really great techniques I use on that are actually based in drama therapy and performance in drama that actually use breathing techniques that are not kind of the old cliche breathe in, breathe out, but use colors and movement and shapes and things to teach people how to actually be aware of where they feel something and how to move it around them so they get a sense of control.
Yeah.
So identifying where you feel something has a lot of cool stuff to go with.
So this is the psychological equivalent to breathing and meditation.
Yeah.
To get you out of your head.
Yeah.
Or get your intellect out of your mind.
Right, to stop overthinking so that it becomes really present versus...
Yeah. And get you into observing as opposed to swimming in it.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Exactly.
All right.
So the time on the wall says...
It's time to go.
We're time to wrap it up. So thank you so much, Lou. It was a great... chat today, and next week we'll come back and maybe we'll talk about weight loss and other good stuff like that.
Contact information is on the screen, but you have offices in Bedford and Tewksbury?
Bedford and Tewksbury, Mass. And yes, and certainly I welcome all the thoughts and ideas that people have been sending me during the week, so please keep doing that. It's great.
All right.
Thank you so much.
You have Daily Gameface on Facebook. If you've got the link there, so you can go there. Yeah. And podcasts on right now on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Google. Apple soon. We're working on it.
Apple soon. Today?
Yeah, we'll see.
Hopefully.
It's up to Apple.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much. Have a great week, everybody.